Okay, I have another topic that I'd like to discuss, and that is your new book called The Fat Tail.
Yeah.
And I can't remember, do we have a subtitle, or is it just The Fat Tail?
It's The Fat Tail, the power of political knowledge for strategic investing.
Right. But I must ask you, The Fat Tail.
Yeah.
Explain, please.
That's not self-explanatory?
No, it's not.
It's not. It's not. It's true. Well, the last book was the J curve, and so generally I'm just trying to pick up market terms and use them for my own nefarious purposes.
Good.
I think that's the general idea as a fellow political scientist. I mean, a fat tail, you're talking about normal distributions, and in principle, you like to believe that lots of things like coin flips and maybe market outcomes have normal distributions.
Right. When you say normal, so we're looking at a curve like?
Curve like this.
Right.
Yeah, this is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like this.
Just like that.
Very good.
Yeah, and so the tails are thin.
Right.
Both sides. But what we're finding, of course, in this environment is that storms that are supposed to happen once every 100 years actually are happening every 6 months or every 6 minutes.
Right.
And so that means that the tails are fat. And a lot of people talk about these fat tails as being things that you can't predict, you can't understand, you can't manage. But part of the reason that Wall Street is having a hard time predicting and managing these once-in-a-100-year storms is because they're not about economics. In this environment, they're increasingly about politics. Mm-hmm. And if you understand that, then you have a much better capacity to anticipate problems, understand who the winners and losers, relatively speaking, are going to be, mm-hmm. and to try to manage some of that risk. Mm-hmm. So the fat tail is about the fact that a lot of these risks are actually political in nature and how one goes about thinking about them and managing them.
Right. And am I right to conclude from this, though, that in some ways it's not, what your enterprise is about is not so much about prediction per se, but about, as you say, anticipation of certain types of events and then the proper preparation for dealing with them?
Yeah, I think that political risk is about two things. It's about the absence of stability or the comparative stability and shock. And you rarely get shock, right? Things hit you, you're shocked by them because you didn't anticipate them. Often you couldn't anticipate them. But relative stability is very important because if you understand how stable an underlying country is, a sector in a country, a government, a political party, then you understand their resilience to shocks as they hit. We know that shocks are going to hit, but certain types of governments will be more resilient to deal with those shocks. And by the way, certain types of governments will actually create some of their own shocks. And so it's really about not predicting shock. It's about being able to better understand an environment where lots of shocks actually occur.
So let's take the combination of the lessons of the J curve and the fat tail, and we're in the middle of a shock now. Here, how well built are we to deal with this?
That's a great question. And I think the answer is that the United States is incredibly well placed to deal with shocks because it's a very stable system. The problem is that that's
stable and open.
Stable and open. And the problem is that that stability also, hand in glove, creates complacency. And the ability of a government like the United States to take significant measures to deal with potential threats to the foundation are very low. So, Rahm Emanuel, Chief of Staff, comes out, and I thought this was a wonderful quote, right before they came in and the inauguration, said this economic crisis is too great an opportunity to be missed, to not take advantage of. And the real problem is that's not true. That Congress does not believe that this is too great an opportunity to take advantage of it. That's why you see earmarks. That's why you see a slowdown in the process of getting things passed.
They're perfectly
You're
happy.
still seeing politics. I wouldn't say they're perfectly happy, but they're sufficiently complacent.
Right.
They're insufficiently moved to actually get away from politics as usual.
But isn't this crisis different from many of the previous crises in that nobody's insulated from it? In other words, we go to war, but only certain people serve.
Right.
That there's been a certain built-in complacency to American life. People have been able to live in gated communities. They've been able to isolate themselves in one way or another. But isn't this crisis different in the sense that everybody's affected? There's no escape.
I guess I'd put it. Yeah. I think I would agree with that, but I would also put it the other way. Everyone feels a little insulated, and everyone feels justified that they should be taken care of now. They shouldn't be suffering any significant pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about how we respond to this crisis, well, of course we're going to take care of everybody that's lost
Right.
money or is underwater in these
Right.
mortgages, irrespective of whether they never should have been the mortgages or not.
Right.
Of course you're going to bail out these companies that are going under. And I'm not, this is a big
Right.
discussion as to whether or not
Right.
you should do that. It's a debate that
Right.
reasonable people can have. But is there a willingness to take pain in this country right now? No. Is there a willingness to seriously spend to create structural changes for the way this country operates in terms of climate change, in terms of energy infrastructure, in terms of leadership for the G20 and for a new financial architecture? There is not. And so as a consequence, the great danger of a country like the United States is not that it's not stable. In a sense, it's that it's too stable.
Mm-hmm.
So that the scale of crisis that you need to shake the United States into changing is enormous in its severity.
Is the president missing an opportunity? People were critical of President Bush after 9/11 that he didn't ask for sacrifice, that he said, keep shopping, etc. That was a frequent criticism of him. What you're saying now is that President Obama is not asking for sacrifice. He's saying, we'll take care of you. Is that a mistake?
I don't think he's saying, we'll take care of you, but I also don't think he's asking for sacrifice. I think he's being very cautious. Mm-hmm. I think President Obama is saying, this isn't going to be easy. It's a very serious situation. In fact, Bill Clinton came out and said he should be talking up the economy a little bit. Come on, you're depressing everybody. This is about perception. Investors need to invest.
Right.
So he's taken it on both sides. There's no question.
Right. That's
the problem with trying to be a centrist politician in the U.S. is that you suddenly find that there is no center.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people around the center, but there is no actual center. And he's experiencing difficulty as a consequence of that. But I do think that he is not saying that there is need for serious and immediate leadership in a momentous way in this country. He's
Mm-hmm.
not doing that. He is, to a degree, still very much in cautious election mode. Mm-hmm. And in this kind of a crisis, I think that's really going to hurt him.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a sense, though, that maybe he's building up to this big moment, or that's unlikely?
I think he's moving towards it. I think he's moving towards it slowly. And you know what we find? I mean, there's been this big discussion about whether or not you should nationalize Citi and B of A. And clearly, the administration doesn't want to do it, and they're delaying. But the markets can force them to.
Right.
This is an environment where the markets will move faster than the administration. I remember when we had this conversation a while back about the G20, and you and I were saying, will the G20 be effective? And I said, well, the G20 is going to meet in April. I promise you the financial crisis is faster moving than the G20. Right. The financial crisis is a lot faster moving than Obama. And that discrepancy in speed really needs to be brought to a more manageable basis.
Right.
And I hope they do it, but I'm not convinced they're going to.